Hi, my name is Donovan Evans. Some people call me Photodono, or just Dono. I'm an award-winning photo artist, and I've got over 25 years of experience with making things with my camera. Lately, I've been obsessed with the Milky Way, around since 2016. The self-assignment photo challenge is basically, its primary goal is to inspire you to take more photos with subjects that might be outside your comfort zone. Now, you kind of might be thinking with words like assignment and challenge, they might be intimidating, but it's not. Don't panic. By exploring these new techniques and equipment choices, you'll increase your photography skills. These self-assignments are not a contest or a judged event. It's an opportunity to share and inspire each other. We'll be meeting online to go over the images in a round-robin discussion about the inspiration of the photo. We'll talk about the composition, the equipment, and everything else. I'll also review the editing process for my submissions as well, too. Also, print sales and gratuities help me pay the bills and put food on the table. Remember, I have a family to feed, and I'd rather have them eat something other than me. Please drop by my tip jar at paypal.com/paypalme/photodono. Think of it as buying me a cup of coffee or beer. Beer. For additional updates on classes, please feel free to stop by and check out my website. Here you'll find out a little bit more about my work as well. Also, another way to help out is if you can stop by my sachi.com/photodono page. Here you can browse some of the current prints and artworks I've been working on. You'll find originals or one-of-a-kind artworks here. There's also another option for canvas and fine art prints. You can find out when I'll post new work when you click the link to follow me at Sachi. The added benefit was to help increase my visibility to other art collectors. Every little bit helps, and anything you could do would be most appreciated. List of classes I'm teaching at Johnson Photo Imaging. Stop by jpiphoto.com and click on About Classes, and you'll find out more about what's going on there. And if you're in Bradenton, Florida, stop by Johnson Photo Imaging, and we'll be glad to help you with your photographic needs. The store is located on the Gulf Coast of Florida. I also post about the classes on Facebook and Instagram at JPI in Focus. Some of you discovered me through Meetup. I also run another Meetup page called the Low Light Photo Group. If you haven't already, please stop by and sign up, and you'll get updates when the next self-assignment is.
Okay.
All right. Hey, first of all, thank you all for coming in tonight. I appreciate it. I know things have been hectic these last couple of weeks, and I really appreciate you guys taking the time and joining me here tonight. All right, cool beans. All right, so I'm going to share my screen with you all. All right. Well, again, as I said, thank you all very much for joining me tonight. For those who don't know who I am, my name is Donovan. Name is Dono. A couple events that are coming up that you guys might be interested in. This has been very popular, so I'm doing it again in case anybody who's interested. Sunrise over the Skyway. I try to photograph the sun in between the pole there and the two arches at the on the Skyway Sunshine Skyway Bridge. I usually go to Fort DeSoto. It happens about 2 times this year in one spot. Keep in mind there are other spots throughout the year. You just have to basically kind of find it. I like this because it's in Fort DeSoto at the East Beach, which is on the east side of Fort DeSoto, hence the name. And it's really cool if you get a chance, but you got to be really quick. The park doesn't open till 7 in the morning, and the sunrise starts at 7 a.m. I get down there and I'm ready to shoot by 10 after 7. In January, you got a little bit more of a lead time on that. All right. Any questions about any of that stuff? Very good. All right, cool. All right, I just want to mention just one couple of things. I got to try this out. I went to up to traveled this past couple of weeks up at the Blue Ridge Skyway, and I went out to the I know where I went, but apparently my mind can't remember. I traveled up a little bit the Blue Ridge Skyway, went to Shenandoah National Park, and a few other spots around there. This was really cool because it's a neutral density filter and a circular polarizer built in one. I talked about this briefly at the Low Light group meeting last time, and I really enjoyed this thing. I'll be talking about it again and showing you some examples of that later on at the during the low light group meeting. But it's really, really cool. It worked out really well because basically one size pretty much almost fits all. The one I used was a 67 to 82, but they make them in a couple of other sizes as well. This is the filter sizes of your lenses and stuff like that. No, they don't make them for phones as far as that goes, but you really can't use too much like that on the phones. Yeah, at least not any easy way to do all that stuff. But it's really, really cool. If you guys get a chance to check it out, it's well worth the to see it because I don't know if you know this or not, but neutral density filters are expensive. So are circular polarizers for the big filters, and this is like one filter fits all type of thing, and it's much, 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 much cheaper.
That's interesting. And Dono,
Yeah,
you like the transmission, the color temperature and stuff was good on it.
yeah, yeah. I thought it was very good. I mean, it's like any of the other variables and stuff like that. There's a limit to where you can turn it to, where you start getting maybe like a little bit of an X through it all, and it's
Yeah,
written on there where you need to stop for neutral density. But that's pretty much given with a lot of those variables.
sure.
But I thought the color transmission worked out really well. You know, I had bright blue skies throughout the whole entire shoot, and it worked out. Again, I'll show some examples of that later.
Great,
I
great.
mean, next time I do a low light group meeting. Uh, for those who are asking what focus stacking is a technique. This was actually suggested, I think, by was it Larry that suggested this? I think he did, or was it Glidden? Glidden, you suggested this, I believe. Focus stacking is a technique that is allows you photographers to create in a single image where objects on various focal planes are all in focus. It's called focus stacking because focus stacking or focus layering, because you can basically use software to basically rack them and stack the images and put them together, and you get with minimal loss of clarity and sharpness as a result of it. Which begs the mind, you have to have a little bit of an understanding of depth of field when it all comes to all this stuff. Most of us here, I think, understand most of the stuff dealing with aperture and stuff. So basically, again, the lower f-stop number, the narrower the depth of field, the higher the f-stop number, the wider the depth of field. However, the trade-off, of course, is the higher the number, the less light you can capture at one point when you get more light over here. This is typically true when you're dealing with macro and things far or things of distance along the way, because those are probably the three things that affect the most the depth of field. You got the lens focal length, and you got the distance to the subject and the lens aperture. All these modify your depth of field. Again, for those who don't know, depth of field is basically you're focused on one thing, you got a focus plane, and when that focus plane is basically it's a flat, like I think of the edge of a sheet of paper, and everything in front of that paper and everything in back of that paper, that's how much is going to be in focus. Now, you see the one on the left is what the lens sees, and and the one on the right is where it's cropped and scaled to fit. The guys at I think it was an f-stop had these guys had this little cool little gif which I thought worked out really well, and it works. And you can see that it really gives a good representation of dealing with what they call expansion and compression, and how you can take something that's really blurry in the background and bring it up. Again, now when you're doing focus stacking, this is a little bit trickier because again, you might have to worry about the incredible distance between some things, especially like with big buildings or things really super far away or an extreme amount of distance. I did an example that I'll talk more about in the edits where there's an extreme amount of distance between my subject and its background as well. So again, the smaller the number, the narrower the depth of field, as you see on the one on the left. The one on the right, the wider the depth of field with the f-stop. As I said, distance matters. So if you're playing around with distance and you don't change your f-stop on your system, again, you can change this on your cameras or phones or whatever these days. And if you change your distance, you get to modify your depth of field as well. Both of these are shot at the same f-stop, so effectively that's one modification, but changing my distance between these two things, between this thing, I mean, you get to see a much more significant difference in the sharpness from the distance I moved away from the closeness of it all, because I'm focused all the way on the back of the steering wheel. There are other apps out there that you can actually use to help out that are free. They don't cost anything. This is one that I've used quite a bit in some of my classes here, DOFsimulator.net/en. And basically, as you can see right here, I'm doing a little video. You can basically go in there and you can actually tell it what you've got. And then you can kind of like pre-visualize what you're going to see when you go out there. So again, this is just to help out with depth of field because again, focus stacking really depends upon dealing with depth of field. So here's a significant thing. The subject in the foreground with a wide angle lens, you can get by with a lot of leeway with a wide angle lens with your background, especially if your subject's close enough. And that works out really well because it's so small, the details get kind of lost in there. However, when you bring it up close, you can see there's a significant difference between your subject and that. Now, that can be a lot of fun when you're playing around with it, dealing with then moving your distance, keeping a decent telephoto, and then modifying your f-stop to try to get it as narrow as possible. Again, that's one way. It's not focus stacking, but it's one way to help try to get everything in focus. If I was to shoot both my son and the background and then compile those focus, then that would be focus stacking. But this is a typical thing. What most people try to do is try to do a picture that looks exactly like this, where you step back, you zoom in, possibly, and then you look at your background and you increase the f-stop as much as you can, so that way you get as much of your background and foreground in within that depth of field as possible. Now the mountains are so far away, it's never going to be in that type of focus. Here's just me being a goof and putting it down to the smallest f-stop number, not changing my distance. So what subjects work best for focus stacking? Very deep landscape scenes, ultra close macro subjects, and deep building interiors. Your depth of field won't be deep enough. If your depth won't be deep, and only parts of the shot will turn up sharp. So when you got these really large, deep landscapes from something between something close to you and far away, or ultra close macro when your subject is very teeny tiny, or deep building interiors. So a lot of architectural guys will do this stuff. Architectural photographers, macro photographers, and landscape photographers. Again, depending on what it is they're trying to photograph. So what do you need for all this stuff? Well, obviously you need a tripod, a camera, and some software. So tripods, again, are very useful creatures, especially if you're doing any kind of focus stacking, because you need to lock down your camera system in order to make sure you get the best results. Can you do it by hand? Of course you can. But the thing is, then you're going to be dealing with some not so sharp images in the final result. I mean, it might be fairly close, and there are tools within Photoshop to help align these things. But again, it doesn't necessarily always work out to the best for everybody when they're working on that stuff. So again, if you're trying to concern about detail, I'd recommend definitely getting a tripod. If you're using a gimbal, that's great, for your telephotos. But definitely get something that's going to make it easy and quick enough so you can get stuff around. Keep in mind, a tripod also helps you plan out your shots. If you're doing a lot of macro work for focus stacking, you might want to consider getting a tripod that does that for you, or at least helps you out in those things. There are all sorts of different tripods for different results, and they can give you a variety of, just like for this one on this here on this B photo, which I use, it allows me to put the thing almost level to the ground if I want to do that, which is really cool. You can get also focusing rails on this stuff. Focusing rails allow you to choose very small amounts. Again, dealing with macro as far as that goes. Not so much with landscape. Again, macro gets the big push when it comes with dealing with this because, as I mentioned before, distance matters. So the closer you get to something, like on that picture of the car from the steering wheel, the closer you get to something, The issue that you start running into is the depth of field keeps shrinking and shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. So when you get really close to something, your depth of field, even if you choose a higher f-stop number, is going to be very, very small. And that's where focus stacking comes into place. There are different ways you can help out with that to help you get close up on stuff. There are close up filters, which you can get, or diopters, as they're sometimes called, then that you can allow you to get as close as you can. This was shot with the Nikon 75 to 300, which is normally about 3-ish feet away, and I was about 11 inches away with this particular one with a +4 diopter shooting this bee. And you know what? They never listened to you. The bee didn't stay there all the time. It was about 45 minutes trying to get this bastard to stay in one spot,
But
as I'm
he's looking at you.
yeah, I know, but at least I got a decent shot. I mean, I was very happy with the shot. I mean, I could probably run it through a couple of programs now because I shot this a few
No, it's a great shot.
but, yeah, but I was, but, there's limitations with stuff like that because, again, if you're concerned about sharpness and detail, it doesn't necessarily get there, but it gets really close. Again, there's
And
all
the trick is not to get stung, right?
yeah, the trick is not to get stung, exactly. So, the other thing that you could use was called, what they call a extension tubes. Extension tubes are useful because that way you can remove your lens from your camera, and that allows you to get closer and closer and closer. This is from Canon with their extension tubes, with the Canon 70 crop sensor system with their 18 to 135. I don't really use extension tubes. I just basically use the minimal focus distance, or I use a macro lens these days. It's one of those two. None of these are perfect, but you can see this got really close. There's a little bit of the focus is off a bit again, but you can see again, this is not focus stacking. This is just allow you to get close, and you can see there's a considerable amount of softness around the image as far as that goes. Again, these are all common things what people do when they're trying to do macro stuff. If you're trying to get focus, you're nearing the minimal focus distance, the aperture again declines. And this happens with a lot of macro lenses as well too. So even though you might be say shooting at 2.8 on some lenses, you get down a little bit lower on that as well. This is just something I threw in there because I do with do a macro class as well. And this is just if you're really interested more about macro as far as that goes. Again, this has nothing to do with focus stacking, but just dealing with the fact that your aperture is going to change a little bit the closer you get to it because there's a little bit of variety on some of these macro lenses that are out there. So for instance, if I got really close with a Tamron's 90 millimeter macro, which is 2.8, but the closer I get to something, you might know when I'm focusing close, you might notice that the aperture goes down to 3.5 instead of 2.8. This all has to do with some of these little variations of how they're put together to make it work. And these are just some of the lenses that I just throw there in case you guys are interested in some of these things. Keep in mind, you don't have to worry so much about the exposure because the light meter calculates this difference in there, and you can always pay attention to your light meter or take the picture if it's too bright or too dark or whatever. So again, I mentioned I usually use lenses that get me as close as I can to something. So this was at 300 millimeters with a minimal focus distance at 18 inches. So that works out really well for getting close up. But again, this does not focus stacking. This is just getting close. Again, a lot of people confuse close up macro with all this stuff with sometimes with focus stacking. This is just you getting close. Again, if you want this background there, and I'll get into that in just a moment, where you can get a little bit sharper detail by changing a variety of different focus points.
Dono, can I ask a
Yeah,
rhetorical question?
sure.
So that last lens is a telephoto zoom and not a macro?
Right. This is a telephoto, 18 to 400, and this is on a shot on a crop sensor body, and this is as close as you can get at 300 millimeters.
So that's another way to go.
Yeah.
And I find in my experience, it's not quite as sharp as the macro lens,
No, it's
but
not.
it's pretty darn close.
Yeah,
And it does get you at a comfortable working distance. So
exactly.
that's not a bad way to get into this macro world with the telephoto and see how it works out. As
Yeah.
long as you can get close enough.
Yeah. Now, again, if you're shooting with a phone or anything like that, your phones already get fairly close anyway, so you don't really need it. I mean, there are adapters out there for phones, but I think I don't really use them at all, and I've never seen anyone. I mean, I've seen other people use them, and I just get close as I can to something and do that. Now, maybe not so much the bees, but stuff like this, I would try to get as close as I can. Now, again, this was shot with a telephoto lens. It got zoomed up as close as I can. This is again about feet away, I believe, for this one. According to the manufacturer, it's 37.4 inches away, so it was probably close to that. This was shot with a that was approximately about 10 inches away from this guy. So again, minimal focus distance with this type of stuff. Again, you see how soft that background is because I was shooting this at 6.3, but you see how close I was to the bee, and that's how far away. Even though this wasn't like, an enormous amount of distance, I'm literally inches away from this bee. And even though that might be a few feet away from me, since I'm focused on that, everything seems to be really soft. So again, if you're trying to get into these things where you get focus stacking and doing stuff, well, something like this is done with a point and shoot camera, which had focus stacking built into it, which is really cool, where it shoots a bunch of pictures and combines them all together for you. This was shot with the Olympus TG6 with this guy right here. It's really cool. TG5, excuse me. Again, a macro lens, like as Kevin said, that you get sharper and greater detail. You can also get some better bokeh as a result of it, depending upon what's in the background right there. And this was at f4, a little bit more of a reasonable f-stop. But again, not as again. I'm getting some. I don't get everything in crystal clear, but that's not always the case that you need to worry about with that stuff. Again, it all depends upon what you're doing.
Dono,
Yeah,
can I say one other thing, and I won't
sure.
keep
Yeah.
interrupting,
No,
but
that's okay.
just to impress upon people, if you're shooting at f4 with a 100mm macro lens, your depth of field might be 1 to 2 millimeters.
Yeah, exactly.
So the bee is probably, if he's facing longitudinally away from you, he's probably 10 millimeters.
Right.
So there's no way, even at f22, there's no way you're going to get that whole bee. So that if you want the whole bee in focus, you have to stack, or you focus on his eye or his head.
Yeah.
But that's the constraints in the macro end of it.
Yeah.
These razor thin depth of field.
Exactly. And that's why you see, like, if you look at something really close up, or sorry, I should say, you look at photographs that have been shot fairly close up and everything looks fairly sharp, they're dealing with focus stacking. I can guarantee you it's focus stacking. It's something that they have, that's the only way they're going to get it, because you cannot get a really sharp image at something inches away. There's a really cool, and I'll show you this guy, a little video from him in just a minute, from Levon Bliss, which does a really cool idea, behind the scenes stuff for what he does for this thing.
Yeah. If anybody wants to test this, just if you have flowers right now at your house, try to take a macro shot of one flower, and you'll see that as it was said, you will focus on the initial petals, and then everything else will fall off. Even though the flower is tiny, it will fall off into out of focus. And then, if you don't have a rail that you can move millimeter to millimeter, the task to focus stack just a simple flower on macro is almost impossible, because Photoshop is not going to know. It's not going to know where to stitch the images together and so on. You can spend hours at a time, like I have done, trying to go through all the images that I put together and then paint. Oh, this petal is from this image. This petal is from this other image. And by the end of 3 hours, you look at it and you go like, why did I waste 3 hours on this task? But yeah, it will be that difficult.
Glidden, can I just mention one thing? I was using Photoshop early, and maybe we're getting ahead of everyone. I don't want to do this, but since you bring it up, Photoshop, I think, is good for landscape stacking. You've got 6 images, and it works pretty well. Once you start putting 30 or 40 sub images in, I found in my world, the computer, there was smoke coming out of the computer, uh, tons of registration artifact.
Right.
So I use Zerine Stacker, and it runs very smoothly. It costs, it's over $100, but it's a one-time thing. But the other thing you can do is you can take your sub images and paint them onto the stacked image. So you can very quickly go through all your subs and put in whatever part of whatever image you want into the stacked image. And you can do that in 10 minutes. And I have a picture I was going to show later where I did that for aesthetic reasons. But Photoshop is a Swiss Army knife. But a lot of those programs they're okay. They're not really designed solely to do stacking. So it's something to keep in mind if you get into that world. It would
Yeah.
make your life a lot simpler.
Yeah,
maybe
another
there's
one that it was recommended to me after I complained about this. It was I think it's called PT GUI or something like that, and is a little bit better stacking
I'm
stuff.
sure there are other programs too. But I said the Zerine one works very nicely for me. But
Yeah, like I will say, I couldn't find a picture to share it tonight, but basically, Donna, one of the times we went on a photo walk in Bradenton, I took a picture of the Tropicana bridge, right,
Right.
train bridge, and I remember going to the store because Photoshop did something weird in the stack that I ended up throwing it away and then doing it by hand because I had elements that started in focus in one sub, right? And then it went out of focus in another one and went back into focus in another one. And Photoshop went absolutely berserk, in the way it tried to stitch everything together.
Yeah, you'll see that coming up when we go into when I show you some of my edits. You'll see some of that. But I want to make some reference because you guys talked about the software, so I'm jumping ahead a little bit here. The Photoshop and Lightroom have their photo merge, and I'll talk more about that at the end. But there's other software too. I haven't used it, but there's a Helicon Focus Stacking Online, which is free, and there's Focus Stacker for the Mac OS. I don't remember now. I think it was free or not. I don't remember, but it's something you could do. And there are apps for your phone that you can try to do it. It's again, you're limited on what the phone can do as far as critical detail, but it does a pretty damn good job, overall. But it's not like, it's not going to be if you were shooting it with other things as well. But that's some of the software you guys can check out and think about. The other thing too, I want to bring back just real quickly here is dealing with something that's called focus breathing, especially if you're using like an 18 to 400 or a lens that has a wide range. If you look through your viewfinder and rotate the lens focus ring from one side to the other, you'll see that the lens appears to zoom in and out very slightly when you're changing the focus. This is called focus breathing. So if you're looking through your viewfinder and you rotate the lens focus ring from one, you'll see the lens appears to zoom in out just ever so slightly. Now, for most people, it's not a big deal, but if you're doing video and you're doing macro video, that's very critical for that type of stuff. So again, if you're concerned about details and stuff like that, and you're worried about this thing and you're trying to get the best, sharpest pictures possible, prime lenses tend to be a little bit better when you're dealing with this type. But keep in mind, they do have the focus breathing does occur in that. It's just not as wide as say the other things. But again, I don't really pay attention to it. I only mentioned it because that's something that people have mentioned in other group chats and whatnot about this stuff. There's actually a pretty good, useful video that's available about demonstration of focus stacking if you really, really, really want to look at that stuff. It's works out pretty well for some folks. And this is just an example of I just took a clip of it where they basically you can see how many frames that they're doing, just at 17 frames to collect all this from this flower. You can see in the variety of shots that's what they do, and then that's how they get this sharp picture. Otherwise, like Lynn says, you shoot all these pictures, and if they don't line up, then you have to basically paint all that stuff in later on.
And Dono, since you mentioned the focus breathing, if you're really magnified, like with a bellows,
Oh,
and you're
yeah.
like at 3 or 4 to 1, you may set up your shot near to you, and by the time you get to the back of the shot, you've run out of room because of the focus breathing. You're cropping and cropping and cropping. So I always start at the back of the image and work out towards me, so I won't run out of room from the focus breathing in shooting my subject.
Yeah, I was going to mention that again because I would, like I said, I don't normally think about it, and that's what I kind of ran into because I started from the beginning, worked my way
Yeah.
forward, and you can see that it's not quite there yet. It's okay, but it's not bad. But stuff like that. Instead of fighting with aperture and shoot multiple exposures with each different focal plane, look at your camera, lock the camera tripod, focus on the foreground object, and take a shot. Next, adjust the focus, blah blah blah, which we've just been talking about for each till you get to the end of the shoot. And as Kevin said, that it's probably better to start from the back and work your way forward. Again, if you're concerned about focus breathing as far as detail and stuff like that. Now, keep in mind your camera's manuals, like my Olympus, it does do focus breathing. I mean, focus stacking, and I can tell it to go which way to go, and it automatically fires multiple shots with different focusing points.
That requires for you to read the manual. Come on.
No.
Manuals are only for when things don't work. Larry can tell you, IBM taught that way back when. So, I found out the other day after having 2 years my R5 that the R5 has focus stacking built in.
Yep. I was gonna say mainly for focus
If
stacking.
you
You gotta,
don't breathe the breathing, you're gonna have a bad day.
yeah. Now, the main thing to do is avoid things that are moving, like trees, wind, and of course, stars and planets, things like that. If focus stacking works much better when the camera is stationary, not moving at all. If you're hand holding it, forget about it. I threw this in there, and I'm going to go deeper into all this stuff later on. But this is something that they did with a stack of dimes, or nickels or whatever they were. And you can see what they're doing is they're just basically they shoot multiple pictures, whether you're using your camera to do it or you shoot the variety of different things. There's a thing it's called auto align and auto blend that you could do to select all the layers once they're all in layers. Again, I'm going to go over this in greater detail, but I threw this in there because again, this is also available online through Photoshop's website about this. And again, all the other so most of all the other software guys have a decent tutorial about how to do all that stuff as well too. Things like that. And once you get all the stuff done together, then you get the picture that you're looking for. And hopefully you get a picture that looks pleasing to the eye. And see, that was just a simple thing. Again, these guys don't move that much, so it's not that big of a deal. As I mentioned before, if you guys get a chance to check out this video by Levon Bliss, this is really a cool little thing that he shows you. He's photographing these insects, and he lights each area differently, so he can get the best detail possible off of each insect. This takes him about, according to him in the video at the time, it's about 3 weeks. Now, if you notice how close he's moving the thing back and forth, he's got even a motorized control so he can actually help him do each of these things. And he's like focusing on like antenna and feet and the eye. And then he puts it all together in his software and combines it all together, all these different things, using a variety of different things. This is like, what I call it Frankenstein focus stacking, he's
Yeah, I don't
literally.
know, Dono, with all that equipment he has, I don't know why it's taken him 3 weeks to do it.
Well, that's what he said. I think he has other jobs. Is what he has.
Actually, Dono, I participated on another talk about macro
Yeah.
a couple of years ago. The guy has kind of a similar setup, right? But he will move the camera, not the subject.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know if you noticed, this guy had adapted microscope lenses at the end of the lens.
Yeah.
the talk I went to, they will adapt it to the camera itself. So you have a single aperture, right? That you needed to know what was on that little lens,
Right.
and this person will be moving like millimeters by millimeter and so on. Like
Less,
one
much
picture will
less,
be
much
30 or
less.
40 pictures. uh, and he was talking, he went into even, well, if I want to have a mosquito, for example, you know, very few people know that the eyes on the mosquitoes are green or kind of greenish. Well, that will be green only for a short amount of time after you kill them. So he needed to rush through to be able to get the eyes of the mosquito green and not black.
That's really cool.
I don't like that post-mortem work myself. I like my insects live when I'm shooting them. It disturbs me to put them on those pins.
Yeah.
Then they move, they don't obey. That's the problem with that.
I'll tell you though, I don't like killing them.
This one was shot. So talking about handheld stuff. This is somebody shot this. Shelby here at work shot this. She had this some sort of cuttlefish, whatever you want to call them, in their tanks. Luckily, you can see how he's kind of moving around a little bit each time as he's breathing. But she used her camera, a little point and shoot camera, to do all this focus stacking in here. And then once she was done, she put it all together. You can see there's another fish in the background over here. And there it's all kind of put together and trying to make it all kind of work out. I cleaned it up a little bit. I changed some of the coloring around a little bit, but I thought that was, again, it's not that hard to do. It's a simple thing to do. It just requires just a little bit of software knowledge and help out with that type of stuff. Hey, this next part, this was something I meant to bring up during the Zoom session, but it just got missed while I was talking about it. So I figured at this be the proper point to bring it back into the presentation, dealing with autofocus. The reason autofocus is important for focus stacking is because you need to be able to set it yourself. There isn't one way or a correct way for approaching autofocus when it comes to focus stacking. I prefer to set it myself in manual focus. So it's helpful to understand some of the primary systems like autofocus S or AFS or servo or one shot for Canon. It would be one shot for AFS for Canon. AFC, that would be continuous. This would be servo for Canon. And there's AFA for autofocus automatic, which means the camera would then switch between autofocus S and autofocus C. Typically, if you're doing focus stacking, you want to be in autofocus S for basically usually a single area of autofocus, but primarily you would use one autofocus point. As I mentioned, I prefer to use manual focus when I'm doing most of my focus stacking. And it's an easy enough thing to switch on and off on the camera. Usually it's on the lens itself. Occasionally you'll find it in the menu system. Some cameras have an additional option, like Sony and a few others, where they call it DMF. This stands for Directed Manual Focus. Nikon had that on there before. It was called A/M, where you would basically be in autofocus, but then you could override it to manual focus. But directed manual focus seems to be the term that's caught on. So basically, it's an autofocus single point or single area focus, and then you would adjust the manual focus accordingly. Manual focus assist is probably one of the most helpful features when it comes to focus stacking. It allows you to tweak the manual focus, and you'll see like with either what's called focus peaking or magnify assist, so you can actually see the areas that you're focused on, which is really, really cool. If you are going to be shooting with manual focus, again, I recommend switching to some of the peaking settings. And you can see here there's a couple of camera screenshots I threw in there where you can find some of these settings. These are the types of words you're looking for: is peaking settings, where you can turn it on and off, and where you can set the peaking. If you see right there on both the pictures there on the cups, one cup in the middle and the top is in red, one cup on the bottom onto the right is red. That's because the focus was on the middle, and then they switched the focus over to the one on the far right. There are some advanced settings for dealing with face and eye tracking. I really don't want to use those at all when I'm doing any kind of focus stacking. It's just usually one focus point or or just a one focused area or manual focus. If I was you, I would just switch these off and while you're doing your focus stack. Again, that's me. You can see here on Canon, they have what's called focus spot or spot autofocus. And then what you can do is then switch it over to 1-point autofocus to, expanded area. But I would still say keep it on the one autofocus point if you can possibly do that. That's what I would recommend. Keep in mind, if you've got your eye focus or face detection or animal thing, you might want to disable that so it doesn't get confused or where to go to next. All right, now this is where I jump into the sharing the photos. Unless the people want me to jump into the editing first, I'm going to leave that up to you guys. It's up to you.
Glidden put up some good looking photos. I wouldn't mind seeing those.
Okay. All right, we're going to go ahead and start. Okay. Now, I didn't see, let me double check. Let me pull up that window. Is Nancy here? No, she didn't make it. Now, Nancy was talking about her, and I'm only bringing this up because she mentioned her mushroom venture that she went on up to the Blue Ridge Parkway and stuff like that, which I thought was really, really cool. There we go. Now there's Nancy. Here we go. So she followed this guy on this YouTube video about trying to photograph where apparently there's some like glowing mushrooms out there in the world. And she was trying to do that. And she said she ran into troubles trying with the focus stack. And if you give me a second, I'll pull up the notes on that real quickly. She said that Florida mushrooms were photos 2 to 5 started with a bulb head and they began to open out later in the cycle. So later mushrooms, as you can see, she shot from North Carolina. She used a macro extension tube on a 300 millimeter lens with the camera on the ground, placed in a pull a few grass blades that got in the way. She tried it with the focus stacking and some of the stuff. It didn't work out too well, as she was saying on some of the stuff. But she mainly was trying on landscape, I think. But anyway, I thought I'd share these little mushrooms that she shot, which I thought some of them were kind of cool. And I thought they,
Yeah.
I mean, at least, I'm not a mushroom fan. I think all mushrooms are poisonous, but but
No,
yeah,
yeah. Yeah.
but she did some really cool shots with some of these things, and she couldn't get to all of them last time. But oops, back up a little bit. Back up. Jumped ahead of this one. So basically, this is the same mushroom, but then she shot it with a little bit more light on top of it. A little bit of motion blur in that one too, but not too bad. But this is her focus stacking thing that she sent in. The link that down there, that was the YouTube link that she watched about dealing with the mushrooms and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Now, again, she said she was having some issues with some of the with the clouds and some of the black spots popping in on there. And and I don't, and I think she said she was using a tripod on this one. She shot this at 28 millimeters, so she didn't say how many pictures she used to do it. I'm assuming at least 5 or 6, but that's my guess.
And Dono, she's on the tripod there.
I think she was handheld. Let me pull up the notes again. Let me see if I can see that real quick.
Yeah.
Focus stacking.
Unless I think,
I
unless
think it looks like I think I don't see it there, but I think in our conversation she said she was using a tripod.
okay, good.
And
Because unless you have that handheld Olympus or whatever program,
right.
I think it's nearly impossible to handhold steady enough for the registration in the stacking programs to really do a good job. I mean, they may give you something, but they just can't handle even small changes in framing from one shot to the next. But if it's handheld, if it's tripod, that shouldn't be an issue.
Yeah. Yeah, she said she had some issues with the clouds and of course some of the water that was moving and stuff, but that's gonna be hand in hand with most focus stacking when it comes.
Oh, yes. I've done this. I've done this a million times. I decide up in Maine to shoot the clouds and the boats at focus stack. Well, the boats are all swinging around at the anchor. So they're never in the same position from one shot to, well, gee, why didn't that work? So that could be an issue too. If it's windy, the clouds are moving. Yeah.
All right, we're gonna jump into yours next, Kevin.
Oh,
I brought you. I did load that picture up of yours that you sent me, and I know you got more on the meetup.
yeah, I only put up 3. They're all different, and some of them didn't come out great. But this was for Macro Mondays on Flickr. They wanted a high key shot, and I did a baby's breath, so that it's 8 millimeters across the flower. So the center of the flower is probably 4 to 5 millimeters. So I'm shooting it with a bellows. So that's like a big extension tube. And I've reversed an enlarging lens. So my working distance is really close to this, like an inch or 2. So this is a 2-to-1 magnification. So there's a table. I just look up to see what's my depth of field. So at I think I was at f11 and 2 magnification. My depth of field was 0.5 millimeter. So if I could go every 0.5 millimeter in, theoretically everything would be in focus. My rule of thumb is I cut it in half, so I make it 1/4 millimeter. I think the only way to do this is with a focus rail. You really can't be focusing on one part of the flower and the other at this level. You can't see it, and the camera can't find the focus on autofocus. So you set up your focus where you want to start. I know I have to have 1/4 millimeter depth between shots. My focus rail, one turn is 1 millimeter. So I turned 1/4 at a time. And I did 30 shots. I did 30 subs from the front petals to the back.
Wow.
And what I really wanted was the center in focus. So after it stacked it in my Zarine stacker, everything was very sharp, but I didn't like the front and the sides of the petals being super sharp. They almost looked like sponge sugar. So what I was able to do was I took my 30 images are on the side, and I can go from the middle of the focus plane, and I can decide how blurry I want, let's say, the petal at the bottom to be. And then I just paint it from that individual sub. So I was doing what Glidden was doing, except it only took me 10 minutes versus a day and a half.
Sorry,
I find that you usually don't want everything in focus. I mean, you expect a certain fall off, and I certainly didn't want the flower in the back to be in focus, and that would have taken another 50 shots to get that stacked. But you want your center of attention to be in focus, and for me, that was the heart of the flower, and that's probably 10 or 12 of my 30 images are that heart of the flower. I find I in macro I focus stack less and less. I like the control of the depth of field and the fall off. Sometimes when everything's in focus, it just looks really flat. But when you need it, you need it. And this is a real, I thought was a classic use of the macro. But I would do it with a focus rail, not trying to. Landscape is great for picking your focus spots and focusing from front to back. But this, you want to be very methodical and just cover boom, 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 boom. Get your shots and stack them with the focus rail.
Yeah, well, when I saw this image pop up on my email, I said, "Well, that was really freaking cool." I'm not sure how well it's coming through on the Zoom stuff, but I really love this. I thought this was really nice, really nicely composed, and again, the 2 little flowers popping over here. I mean, again, I just love that. That is really, really cool. I love it.
And you don't want those in sharp focus.
No. Because you want your eye to be right here is what you want it, and that's what it's doing. The line just leads you back to here. It works out really, really well. That's awesome. All right, I'm going to jump to the meetup page, and then we'll jump to me last here. So just bear with me 1 second. I got to stop sharing, but I'll be sharing again. It's okay.
Oh no, that's okay. I did that with a scrim. I put a scrim and 2 speed lights behind.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Yeah, lighting can be sometimes really tricky when you're dealing with stuff.
Yeah.
Let's see. You put another one over here. This is
Yeah.
your.
Now here's stacking is a tool. So I took the second year with a great guy up in the wooden boat school. I did a week of maritime photography,
Mhm.
and he shoots a Hasselblad. He shoots film. He prints it. He sells it in galleries. So I always do the opposite of what he's doing. So I love this winch. And then there's kind of lumber and trash and a distracting brick wall behind it. And I said, well, I don't want that background in focus, but I wanted the winch really sharp focus. So if I focused on the front, the front cog thing, uh, the winch cable and the back rail was out of focus at f5.6. So I stacked 5 shots, and I'm pointing that no one can see, but so I've got one, for instance, on the handle, and then the cogs, and then the pawl, and then the outside, and then the cable, and then the other side. So at f5.6,
Mhm.
the winch is completely in focus, and the background is blurred out, and that was my intention. Um, so someone in my club said that stacking lets you disassociate your aperture from your depth of field. You can wind up getting more depth of field with an open aperture because you're stacking. You can get around things like that.
Yeah. That's cool. Again, I love the composition of this thing, and I love your explanation about how you got make sure the background stayed nice and soft back there. That worked out really well because I know you would have probably lost most of the back there and back down
Yeah,
there in the bottom
yeah,
there.
I'm looking. So if I focus on the pawl and the ratchets, I can see that the back of the drum is blurry.
Yeah,
And likewise the other way around. So I knew I had to stack this to get it all
yeah,
because it's big enough. It's probably a foot and a half or 2 feet or something wide, and you're getting out of the depth of field.
right. And this is a lot different than if you shot it at say an F22 or F11 or even you're just because I'm assuming you're really close to it. Is that
I
right?
am close. I think it's I forget. I think it's a telephoto lens, and I'm as close as I can get. Um,
Yeah, so you're about
and
3 feet away ish.
yeah, but right. So F22, you're great, except now you see all the trash on the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this was one where again I thought it was a good tool to use the stacking to get what you wanted aesthetically.
Yeah, exactly. That's focus stacking. It can be a very powerful tool if it's used. Well, I don't say wisely or correctly, but just used creatively, and you get some really interesting shots with that. So where is this one? I didn't check that. I
So
didn't see- oh,
This is Sand Beach outside of right outside of Stonington, Deer Isle, and they've got these great rocks on the beach. And this is shot bright sun, 10 o'clock in the morning, probably. And this is a near miss, as Dono can see. Probably, I'm sure he can see. Um, but I wanted the texture of the rock. I mean, to me, that was important. So I wanted the rocks to be in focus from the front to the back. Now, and I'm on a tripod, and I was able to pick my focus points, and I'm in manual focus with the triangles and dot, and on the Nikon camera. But I couldn't get the focus, the single point focus down to the rock in the corner.
talk
Now,
about on the right here.
yeah, so that one's blurry, and I probably thought it wasn't going to be in the shot, and now it's killing me. Um, but what I realized I should have done is my first shot, I should have put a towel over my head, gone to live view, and just eyeballed it in live view and accepted that. And then the rest I could go and use the focus point and my focus confirmer. The problem is if you recompose, if you point the camera at that and then move it on the tripod, now you've screwed up your registration for the other shots. So you really, once you're set up, you don't want to move the camera. But I think I could have done better if I had gone to live view to try to work around that issue. But you know what I'm saying? Your focus is all in the middle of the viewfinder. And if
Right.
you have things in the corners, it gets problematic really nailing focus on them.
Yeah, especially if you're using, again, this is true with any lens that's out. Well, I shouldn't say every lens, but most lenses out there, especially if you're using zooms or telephotos. I mean, they're sharp right there in the center most
Right.
of the time. But when you get to the very edges of everything, they're a little bit on the soft side. Sometimes there's big on the soft side, but usually it's very little. And most people don't really care because they usually don't print the whole thing.
Right.
They're usually cropping it
Well,
anyway.
this is cropped over. And the other thing, Dono, is because the rest of it is so stupidly sharp. Normally, you would have a fall off from your subject,
Right.
and you would just accept that little fall off in depth. You'll call it depth of field.
Right.
But now, because everything else is razor sharp, that thing's like a sore thumb down there.
Well, I'll be honest. Until you pointed it out, I didn't notice it.
Well, you know how it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Yeah, you're always your most harsh critic.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, all right, Daniel. You have a good one, and we'll talk to you later. And keep in mind, this will be on the video when I get that done as well too. So, all right. Have a great night. All right. Let me
Last
see.
thing, that I think that's at f4.
That was
So
an F4.
those rocks in the back and most of the stuff in front is in focus at f4.
That's cool.
So that's the power of focus stacking.
Yeah. All right, Mr. Glidden, you're up.
Well, I don't remember how many pictures are here. I don't know. I wrote them down when I posted the picture. I believe there are 4 because even though I was
5 image.
5, okay, because I was so close to those rocks, right? And I was trying to blur the water. I think I had a 10-stop ND filter in front of it, so it was one of those that each image took 20 seconds, and I didn't want that sun to move away in the final image. So it was one of those that you press the shutter and you go like, come on, hurry up. So you could refocus and take the next one, and refocus and take the next one.
Yeah.
And then when I put them together, was kind of playing where do you want the water, the foam of the water, to either blur some of the rocks or not. It was kind of, I had enough pictures that I could pick and say, no, I don't want the second picture to be this one. I'm going to take, like the third picture and so on. So, even though it was 20 seconds, luckily we had no wind. So that's why the clouds, you don't see them streaking out, as much as in other pictures.
Right.
But this was a lot of fun. A lot of fun to take.
Yeah. Where was this again? I didn't hear that.
That is in the southwest corner of Puerto Rico.
Oh, okay.
I had taken another picture that I show you like a week before this one, from the top of the there is this little beach is kind of down in a cove, and I have taken it from the top the previous week, and I couldn't figure it out how people got down there. So the following weekend, I figured out how to get there, and it was like, okay, luckily I'm alone, so I can take all kind of pictures. And like you said, using photopill, I knew that the sun will go through the arch.
Yeah.
I think that's a spectacular image.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I love that. It's gorgeous, man. It needs to be printed up 30 by 40.
I believe I did print it. So
Oh, cool. That's cool, man. I love it, man. That's cool.
thank you.
All right, let's go to the next one here. I think this is it. All right. Oh, I remember this. You've shot this before. This is really cool.
That was I think my first set of pictures with the R5 right after I bought it. Um, Basically, what I did here was kind of focus on each one of those pieces of wood
Right.
and not worry so much about the water below and so on. I thought, oh, whatever I pick is what I pick, and that's it.
Right.
And full disclosure, that sky is from the same location at a different date because that day the clouds were not as colorful and so on. So yeah, but this was a lot of fun. The problem with this location, actually, am I correct, Dono? They took that down. You know, the last time we were there, it was almost covered by sand or something like that.
Yeah, it was. It was pretty much covered up.
Yeah. So the problem you get if you, this for those of you that live in Florida, this is in Coquina Beach on the outlet of Coquina Beach, and the problem is most photographers that are shooting either weddings or families will be there. They will get in your shot. They don't care that you're set up for a while. They will get in your shot and not say I'm sorry.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Just a heads up too. That reminds me, especially with this sunset shoot that's coming up on Sunday. Uh, this is not a state secret where the sun's going to be. So there is going to be more. There's going to be plenty of, as Glenn says, lots of wedding photographers or couple photographers. Engagement photos. They all show up around the same time.
How many images do you think you stacked in that?
I think I put it there 6.
Yeah,
Six. Okay.
Yeah, that's the thing that's kind of cool with landscapes and stuff. You don't need a lot to stack on. Now, I remember, I think a gentleman, Daryl, was asking me about with phones and stuff like that. When you're stacking stuff, if you really want to do it with your phone, you just basically got to use your phone and just focus on different spots. So if you got the phone with the touchscreen, you can tell it where to focus on,
Yep.
and then you can stack them later on in software or whatnot. But again, keep in mind, a lot of the phones have some of these features already built into it. So it's kind of fun to play around with, again, without any kind of camera. Oh, this is really cool. I love this, Glidden. This is
Thank you.
especially this right here. It's just a nice touch, whatever this is that pops up in there. And that's really cool.
Well, that you know where that is. That is
Is that
Beer
Beer Can?
Can Island.
I heard they cleared all that stuff out.
I don't know because that will disappear depending on the tides and so
Right.
on. So if any of you want to go there and try it, just wear shoes because I went barefooted and step on one of those things that was just a little poke, outside of the sand, and I was limping for a while. So this image was complicated in the sense that I needed to focus on every one of those legs that were because they were at different places. I tried to position the camera so they had the least overlap, against each other. But then the problem is because they're at different positions and far enough that you have to focus on each one of those legs and then the base of the tree and then move to the other one. And meanwhile, you can see we had waves that day. So you have the waves coming. Your tripod tends to sink every now and then and so on. And you might get some pictures that you go like, oh, hold on a second. Like I remember there was a bunch of boats that went through the area. So I had to go at the final image, remove like maybe 3 full boats and 2 half boats that were captured as it was stacked.
Well, that's what Photoshop is for. But
That's why the good Lord invented Photoshop.
I think these are 3 fabulous shots that you've put up.
Thank you. Thank you.
Dragging the shutter, the water looks great. The sky is whatever day it was. The sky looks great. I think you could print all 3 of these and sell them to one of our new hotels going up.
Yeah, there's gonna be a bunch of new hotels going up. That's for damn
Oh
sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, very good work.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's nice stuff, man. Now I feel kind of sheepish showing mine, but that's okay.
Yeah, you were the one. I had to go through my whole library this morning looking, well, Donald said, 12 shots. Darn, I don't have one with 12 shots.
That's fine. All right, let me see where we're at here. Let me see. Stop share. Okay, let me jump back into Keynote. That's where I threw mine at.
Dono, I'll say one other thing while you're
Yeah.
doing that. When you're focus stacking landscape, it's the foreground that's important.
Yeah.
So you want to cover the first
Right.
foot and
Mhm.
3, and because you'll see people like off past the horizon focusing on 9 different things, and there's not much bang for the buck out there. But you got to make sure you've covered like every one of those tree roots exactly has to be covered in the foreground. So
Yeah.
something that it took me a while to figure out.
Yeah. All right, so here's my claim to fame tonight. This one is, and I'll talk more deeper about this with the edits. This was this spider's web. I shot this at 150 millimeters, mind you. The spider's web. I was zoomed up on the spider's web, and this was at Bach Tower Gardens. So I wanted to see now, and I focus stacking's never been what I would call something I do all the time type of thing. But it's not that it's really hard to do. And again, I'll talk more about in the edits. But when I shot this picture, I'm literally about 3 feet away from this, and the tower is several hundred yards behind them. So again, and so what I did was I let my camera shoot a gazillion pictures apparently because I didn't quite figure out how to do the settings yet at that time, and I got more than I needed, but I wanted to have the spider's web in front of it, and I tried to line it up as best as I could with that bird over there because I thought that was kind of cool that there was a bird in the background behind the spider's web. Anyway, so this was the end result of that. I did have to fix up some of the coloring and stuff, and you can see on some of it. And again, you'll see more of it in the edits and stuff like that. Oops, where'd it go? There it goes. Oh, come on. You can see like here in some of this here got kind of, blown out a little bit right there. Not as sharp as I would have liked. I was trying to keep all this. And you can see where bits and pieces of it kind of blew out, but it didn't really bug me as much, and of course, the tower is off a little bit on an angle and stuff like that. But again, this all kind of, for me, it worked out really well for me. And I like the fact that the web kind of extends off the page, stuff like that. But anyway, I thought,
It
anybody know what
really,
spider? I'm sorry.
it's really vibrant and dynamic, the image.
No, thanks. Anybody know
I,
what
I,
spider this is?
I even don't know. I even like the blown out areas.
Yeah.
Oh, you like this?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Especially the one to the right, with the colors and so on.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Well,
Yeah.
there was light hitting it there, so that I think the software got confused about what that was, and stuff like that. If I really wanted to dig deep, I probably could have, but I said that's good enough. And I'll show you in the edits how many pictures that was and that stuff. This was another one that I did too as well, and I wasn't sure what the hell this was, and somebody finally told me it was a magnolia seed. And this is again, this is not a macro. This was shot with a 12 to 40 millimeter lens. I got as close as I could, and I forget what the minimal focus distance is on that thing. I want to say it's about a foot away or whatever. And I shot this at 40 millimeters. And this is actually a cropped version of it, and you'll see the little bit more of it there. But I was just tickled pink at the level of detailed stuff. But you can see, and again, I know this isn't quite focus tech, but I really thought that was kind of cool the way it all kind of flowed into each other and stuff like that. The picture that I think this is the focus stacked version of it, but I still think that this is the oops, wrong way. Hang on. I still think that this is the better shot
Yeah.
Of that.
Yeah.
But I just love the way it looks and everything else. It's a little bit soft back there, but again, that works out well for me because I really like the fact.
I really think it gives 3-dimensionality to the shot.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So on this one right here, this was a focus tech one. This ended up being about Again, a gazillion pictures, but I only used maybe about a dozen or so pictures in this particular one. You can see there's parts of it where the software, again, I'm using Photoshop, didn't quite render it as well as I would have hoped on there. But again, it doesn't bug me as much. I mean, I know it's there, but what am I going to do? It is what it is now at this point. But again, I still prefer the other one, but I still like the fact that there's a little bit of some squish with that. I think a squirrel left it on the table there. So, and that's what it was. It was just sitting on a table at Bach Tower, and when I was out there. So I went out to Bach Tower, and I was practicing some of my focus stacking skills. Now this is a landscape one, and this one only took about a few pictures to do. Like you said, I did the foreground, I did this background, I mean middle ground right here, and then I did the back right there. The lens I used was the 12 to 40, I think, on this one. Yeah, 12 to 40 on this one. So, and this was at 25 millimeters on here. This was on a failed day when I was trying to shoot the sunset in between the pier, and this was a failed day. It didn't happen. I did tweak the sky bit a little bit back behind it, but other than that, I mean, what I wanted to do was, of course, I focused here first on the shell. This was at 2.8. To be honest, I don't remember why I used 2.8. If I had gone back in time, I probably would have done 5.6 or somewhere around there. But anyway, 2.8 in there. And then it gets kind of still a little bit soft back there, but not as soft as it could be. But again, it's wide angle shot, so it's, well, wide-ish anyway for this. And so it's not too terribly bad. But I like the way it kind of, it reminds me of a quiet day at the beach type of thing,
Yeah. And there's no way the foreground is in focus if you don't
Yeah, exactly.
stack that.
Mhm.
I mean, I think Glidden, you were there the day that I shot this. I think you're the one that said, "Hey, put a shell down," and I threw the and so I mean, I was literally, that shell was right there in front of the camera, pretty much.
Yeah.
And I can't think. I don't, and I have this in the edits, and I'll show you some more of that stuff in a few minutes.
Yeah,
Did
that was the
anybody?
day. That was the time. Remember that the wedding came through and said, "Oh, do you mind if we take some pictures?" And we were like, "Well, lady, we're waiting for the sun, so come on."
Yeah. All right. Does anybody have any other questions before I jump into this here? No? Okay. Like I said, you can always jump in and take a look. So again, I'm gonna start with this guy because again, it's probably the best example of doing a macro with stacking that I did. So you can see there's a gazillion pictures that my focus stacking on camera did. And there's quite a few more, but I only used like the first 20. It had enough,
Only,
it had
only.
more. It had more, but I only used the first 20 in that particular example right here. So you can,
Dono, I have a question. How does the camera determine how many shots and at what spacing? Is it always the same or does it change?
there's a way to tell it how many shots to do, and then I just maxed it out. I said just do the whole damn thing.
The whole card.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to see what it would do. I just want to see what it would do. Well, not the whole card, but it maxed out the number of shots it could do in that one shot. So it started at the beginning and it worked its way backward. This is where it kind of fell apart a little bit on this one, but it's not terribly bad. Again, I'm using Photoshop for these things. So what I have to do is I start in Lightroom and I have to open them up in layers in Photoshop and put them into so they're all in layers. Now these were all raw files. Again, not terribly large raw files in comparison to some of the newer cameras out there, but these are like 20, 30 megabyte files ish. And so these are all in here. And so it does take a bit of time for some computers to process all 20 of these things. So again, you can see right here, this is pretty much where it starts out as. And then what I do is I have to go in there and do what's called auto align layers. And that's usually found under edit on there. And you go down to auto align layers. And once you do that, then the computer will then take all those layers and line them up. And you can see I know I handheld this bastard, so you can see it didn't quite line up a little bit. Now I didn't move around too much. Again, this wasn't moving either. So, but there, it's probably a little
That's
bit of
pretty
handheld
good.
and a little bit of focus breathing in there, but not terrible because you can see like there's a little bit of a gap right there. And then once you do that, then you can do what's called auto blend layers in Photoshop. And once you do that, it'll actually analyze the whole picture for you, or each picture element, and then figure out what to do. So you have to choose stack images. I didn't choose content aware. I left that alone, and I just basically just choose stack features, the stack images. And now you could use content aware to fill in some of the dots and whatnot, but like I
It
said, you
can
can
do some
crop this
goofy
out.
things if you let it do that.
Yeah,
You don't want to give it too much control.
yeah, exactly.
So,
So once that's done, you can see over here on the right hand side, it basically analyzed the picture and told me which ones were sharp and which ones weren't. And I just let it, and I just basically flattened them all together. You can see there's quite a few, quite a few in there.
and for the others, Dono, if they're, I know you, I mean, it masks the image.
Yeah,
So it blocks all the out of focus part of the image, and it lets the focus part go through. And it does that for each image. And when you pile them all together, you wind up with all the good focus stuff running through. It's incredible that, I mean, that this can even do this. I can't believe it.
I know it's just one of those really amazing things. But again, macro, you really have to just go nuts with it and shoot a bunch of pictures and and do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I should have started from the back and worked my way forward on this stuff, but I didn't. And then that was the like I said, I just tweaked the edit a little bit as far as bring. I thought I was getting kind of reds were kind of getting blown out in this particular version of it. But yeah, it worked out pretty well, and I was pretty happy with it. This was another version of it, but again with the and this is the one I actually cropped, made that little square version out of that one right there. So I think I like that position better.
Yeah. The light is more interesting on the left. And I
Yeah,
don't know, I don't think the stacking interferes with that, but as I said, the I try to get away with less and less stacking for these where close up meets macro world.
right.
I try to do less stacking and get more 3D kind of.
And to be
That's
honest,
very interesting.
I was gonna say I honestly prefer the one on the left because I prefer I like seeing depth of field in my picture.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
again, like you said, it just adds more to it. I mean, don't get me wrong, especially with Levon Bliss's work when he did we call those micro sculpture things. I mean, because
Are you
those
Donovan?
when he ends up blowing it up, they're like about 4 feet or 6 feet wide. It's nuts. Yeah, Daryl.
Kind of what might be a dumb question, but I got to ask you anyway. This photo stacking, is it done inside the camera or is it done inside like Photoshop?
Well, these were done in Photoshop. Some cameras, and like in some phones, it does it for you automatically in there. Sometimes it's one of the options. I know on the Google S22, I think is what it is. They have that option in there. I don't know about the new iPhone Max 14, but I don't think I have it in my 12. But again, if you're using a phone, you just basically line it up and just keep tapping the areas you want. You take that picture focus, take that picture focus. But you basically would probably want to keep the camera on a tripod or stable at one point because it'd be hard to do all that at one point.
I
Uh,
can see putting it on the tripod first. Understood.
yeah, exactly. So that'll help out a lot. I mean, again, any stacking tripod is much more useful than handheld. Considering like this was handheld too. So again, image stabilization was in on the camera, so that worked out really well overall. But you know, so this picture again, you can see I let the camera go nuts and pick a bunch of different ones, but I really didn't need to do that. What I should have done was probably been a little bit more considerate of what I was trying to do. And I should have just shot a focus stack. In this case, I only had to pick three out of this particular one, and combine and then open up in as layers and stack this one image right here. And I just did that to make sure that that was in there. And I did that for this group right here, which was again the reason why I did this is because I could tell when I was looking at closer parts of this picture that not quite everything in the building wasn't sharp. There was some slight out of focus, and I was really more concerned about making sure that this guy stayed in sharp as well too. What I was trying to do with the whole photo was make sure it all looked sharp from there and there. But again, as I said, the tower was hundreds of yards away, and I was like about 3 feet in front, away from the spider there. So once I did all that, I took that one focus stacked image of the spider, and I took the focus stack of that, and then what I did was I just did I left them both in layers, and I just basically selected overlay. And you can see there's a little bit of missing around in there, but that's okay. You can crop that stuff off, and it worked out actually pretty well. And again, I didn't want the spider web to be standing out in front of it, but I wanted the pattern of the spider web to kind of work, give you that circular thing with all the geometric stuff of the or the angular lines of all the tower there. So once that was all said and done, once I did that overlay, it just made it look, and I had to put the spider on the top in order to do this correctly. So if I did it the other way, it'd have been it would have been a little bit different. And then
It's almost like a texture layer to the
yeah.
tower. Very nice. Yeah.
Well, again, it works great when you've got something that's very minimal on the top, and you got something something on the bottom that's a little bit more solid, and that really works well with the overlay layer. I could have tried blending, but I didn't do that. I just wanted to see what it was going to look like when I was done. Now I did reprocess it on the one I showed. This is a slightly different processed version, and compare it to the other one. I like the other one too, but I don't know. I'm kind of going back and forth between this one and the one that I did the edits on, where I kind of bumped up the color a little bit more on that side. But and you can see I cropped it a little bit tighter too over there. So
Yeah. With the contrast up, you definitely see the web more, and I
Yeah.
like that. I like seeing the web a little more myself.
they like the
Absolutely.
more on the right than the one on the
Yeah.
left.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Me too.
Cool, thanks. And last but not least, for the edits and stuff, I would talk about the one. This was the where I shot the show on. So you can see, the sky is not as sexy as it could be. So you can see, again, the shell's right there, and I'm focused on there. And again, I'm shooting 2.8 in almost all these shots. So you can see I'm just basically focusing there, and then I change my focus a little bit further out. Again, the water's moving, so there's not much I can do about that. And I do it again, so I focus on the back there, and I do it again. And then I just let the program kind of figure it out for me at that point. And then I just put a nice warm sunset behind it. But you can see it, for landscape, you don't need to take much, even the water's moving in there. And yeah, there's going to be some issues with the motion of the water. But again, water's supposed to not, I don't,
Yeah.
I wasn't trying to get really sharp images of the water. I just
Right.
wanted it to be, not looking weird,
Right.
between all that stuff. And again, if you blow that area up, it's not the sharpest point on there, because it's really not that sharp. It's kind of hazy over there. But again, I didn't change my focal length. I still have 25 millimeters. And so again, it's all coming in together like that.
Yeah, that's the other thing. There's always atmospheric perspective, and you don't want, if you get rid of all of that, then it looks false, the image. So yeah, that's great stuff.
Oh, cool. Well, thank you very much. All right, let's see. Oh, good, an hour and 34 minutes. Oh, good, plenty of video to edit now. So, we go back to Zoomy Zoom. Let's see. All right, so how many we got left here? Oh, we still got 6. All right, yay! So, all right. So I hope you guys enjoyed tonight's presentation. I really enjoyed doing this. It was a lot of fun. I didn't hear anything from any of our other. I heard from Daniel, but I didn't hear from Kara. So I hope you enjoyed it too, Kara. If you guys got any questions, of course, about any of the things that I've done or shown, you're more than welcome to hit me up or contact me. You can either hit me up at Meetup, hit me up on Facebook or Instagram, or of course email me. You can always go to photodano.com and click on my about, and you can always contact me through there. Let's see what else. Yeah, if you guys, anybody who's out there watching, especially in YouTube land, if you want to help support my shenanigans, you're more than welcome to. I'll never say no to a tip. or a cup of coffee, or a lunch or a dinner. I'm always open for those things. But other than that, yeah, I had a really great time doing this. I hope you guys enjoyed doing this challenge.
As did I. It was a great review, and it was a lot of fun comparing notes. I really.
Oh
enjoyed
yeah, I mean, even the stuff that
Yeah, I
I
learned
always
something.
learn more from you guys than I hope you guys learn stuff from me, but I always learn more from you guys.
Well, I don't think so, but thank you, and thanks for saying that. So great. So I'll keep my eyes peeled for that low light thing. So
Yeah.
thanks, Dono. I had a great time. Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you at the next one.
All right,
Thank
thanks
you
a
for the
lot, guys.
presentation.
Have
Good
a great
night.
night. It was good seeing you, Glidden. I really appreciate the time that you've all taken to spend with me here. And like I said, thank you so much.